So my name is Winslow Jones, and I am a physical therapist by trade. And I currently serve as the president of Atlanta Young Republicans, as a nonprofit organization that just basically helps create a place for young conservatives to come and engage with people. And we have speakers to learn about the political process. It's kind of a stepping stone into politics from the general population.
And how long have you been the president?
Just since January of this year. Okay. So the president can only serve 2 years.
Yeah, but you've been a member of the party since
four years ago. I joined February of 2020.
Yeah, okay. And first of all, congratulations with the result this Tuesday.
Thank you.
What do you think was the primary reason for this convincing victory for the Republican Party?
So I think that he ran a very strong campaign. He ran on the economy, and he ran on the border security issues that we've had, and just general crime and safety issues that we've had domestically. And also, as we see, we have the war between Russia and Ukraine, and in the Middle East between Israel and Gaza. And I think that all these things were working in his favor to say, hey, look at where we were 4 years ago economically and with international peace, and look how we've been the past 4 years. And so I think that was working in his favor. And he had a much more solid ground game, like grassroots ground game this go round. He took the popular vote, he took the electoral college vote, and then we even had we now have the GOP dominating the Senate and the U.S. House.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you see as the most important mission for the Republicans now controlling the White House, and as you say also the Senate? You have quite a bit of a power especially the next 2 years.
Yeah.
So what do you see as the most important job for you?
Yeah. So I think, and I think I can speak for most Americans, is the economy and just making with the tax cuts. We'll see what he does with the tariff situation, because I think that people have a little bit of concern about that. Based on what I've listened to and what I've read, yes, it can kind of, if you do put tariffs on foreign goods, such as from China, the economy can take a brief hit for a second, but really how I understand it is what he wants to do is bring back industry to the United States domestically and empower the U.S. economy that way. And so we have to have taxes somewhere, from somewhere. But I think in general he wants to make huge tax cuts for not just billionaires and millionaires, but for people across the socioeconomic realm. So and that includes the middle class.
It's no secret that the trenches between the right wing and the left wing are getting deeper and deeper. That's like the general
divide,
feeling.
Yeah.
Especially if you look at city versus countryside, elite versus what you would say as hardworking, everyday American citizens. What do you think of this polarization?
Yeah, so it's been growing over the past decade. And, it used to be the Democrat Party were the people of the working people, all the labor unions, and the middle class tend to vote more Democrat back in the 90s and even into some of the early 2000s. But there has been this shift, and you can even see it in the House and Senate in the early 2000s. I think it was 2002 into 3, if I'm remembering correctly, that there was a massive shift from the Democrat-dominated House and Senate to Republican. And now, instead of it being the Democrats were protecting the middleman or protecting the middle class, now it's like you said, it's become like the class of the government-dependent people in the Democratic elite. And everybody else and most people... And
what do you think about this?
So what I think it helps the Republicans, which clearly it did. Because if you looked at the map, and all the by county, even there were many counties in blue California that actually went for Trump. And so it almost looked the counties that went blue were very few and far between, it seemed like, when you actually look at the map after Tuesday. So that was really fascinating to see. So people claim that Republicans want to, there's a sense of you know, and listen, there's a spectrum, right? There's far left, there's far right, and then I feel like most people fall in between, in the middle, from center right to center left, and there are a lot of centrists that just want to vote on the person versus just the party. But with that being said, I think that you've had this shift because the economy has taken such a bad hit with the Democrat policies, especially in the past 4 years. And yes, Trump is definitely one that says things that people don't like. A lot of people don't like his personality. They don't think he's presidential. But on that note, he was interviewed with Oprah. I can't remember if it was the 90s or the 80s, the 1980s, and she asked him if he'd ever run for president, and he only said, only if my country needs me to. Yeah. So I think that when the GOP was pushing that messaging, it was like, hey, yes, he's a billionaire, but you know, he grew up a millionaire, became a billionaire through hard work, and he had you know, just a lot of grit, and he's an abrasive personality. But in general, these tax cuts that he enacted back when he was president the first time actually really did help the middle class. It was just the mainstream media that has been very far left leaning for a while. So I think.
So we're moving on to some concrete subjects now, and the first one I want to speak about is foreign policy, just for a short while. Regarding foreign policy, do you think that the U.S. airline should be transactional, or do you see the U.S. as the only superpower in the world? Do they have like a moral responsibility to work for a democratic and rule-based world order?
Well, I think that so you know, the Trump campaign and the Trump presidency is definitely sort of anti this new world order, where you have this like worldwide governmental body that's calling all the shots and having all this power. And Trump, that's why they hate Trump so much, because he wanted to take away from that and say we want to empower American industry and keep America great, you know. So I do think that the you know, foreign, so a lot of industry and countries like do depend on the U.S. for a lot of things, and I think a lot of people that weren't Trump supporters were afraid he was going to pull out of NATO, and he might have said some things that were threatening, right? But at the end of the day, what he was saying was everyone needs to pay their 2% GDP.
So you don't think he's going to take
I think if
America out of NATO?
I don't think so. I think that he will sit down and say, here's what needs to happen, and if y'all aren't willing to pay your 2%, then yeah, maybe I will. But just kind of like that whole concept of when you're on a plane and you're about to crash and the oxygen mask come down, you have to make sure that you're okay before you can take care of the person next to you. And so I would agree with that. And I don't think that most conservative Americans would be all for or for isolationism, where it's like we just want to be great and just make us great, you know, and not care about the rest of the world. I don't think most people think like that. I don't think that's what a Trump president's going to bring. I think Trump just knows that what he's up against with China, Russia, and Iran in the Middle East, and people that actually that don't like our Western values and want to be world powers. I don't think Trump wants to be a world power. I think he wants to make sure that we keep this American experiment going, because we're the youngest established civilized country in the world, and so first world country. So I would agree with that.
You do think that the U.S. also has a moral responsibility for the world order?
I would say they do. They do have a responsibility. I don't think we need to be the one that comes and saves the day all the time, but I do think that when it's necessary and we're talking about what's going to compromise our Western way of life and live in a free country with all these liberties, but with liberty comes responsibility. So
let's try and zoom in on Europe and the war right now between Russia and Ukraine. The Ukraine has been fighting almost 3 years now. A very small country. Have been supported a lot by also the US, but also the rest of the Europe nations. First of all, what do you think of the war in Ukraine? What are your thoughts on that?
So my personal thoughts, I don't think that the US should have not helped out at all. I just think that where's that money going? There's billions and billions and billions of dollars that Biden had given the president, Zelensky, and it's, why aren't they able to, like, what are the outcomes of these, of all this money that we've given them?
Yeah.
So because we're already in trillions and trillions of dollars of debt ourselves, like here in America. So it kind of goes back to, hey, let's make sure our economy is strong so we can continue to help, fight evil.
But you're actually a little bit, you are raising a question mark on where the money is going.
So it's, why is it still going on if we're giving all this money to them? Like, I just question that. And it looked like just yesterday, there were articles published about how I don't think Putin's saying anything just yet, but the Hamas has actually declared that they're going to stop the war now that Trump's in Israel, now that Trump's being elected. We'll see what Putin does. I think that there's potential for Trump and Putin to negotiate for peace, is what I'm hoping.
Yeah, okay, but that raises the next question, because what do you think is the most reasonable way to end the war in Ukraine right now?
I know that there's a long history. I'm not a historian with Russia and Ukraine. And there are people that have an argument pro-Russia, people that have an argument pro-Ukraine. What I don't understand is why can't they just leave Ukraine alone? Just like Israel, why can't we just leave Israel alone?
Yeah.
And just, I know that there's a history there.
Yeah, that's like in history, and Russia sees it like some of the things they are invaded now, it's their territory. So it's all a territorial question. Yeah. My question is, like, there are two options right now, if you really narrow it down. There's like the option for Trump and Putin next year, for example, in the spring next year, to like make a deal. How do you end this war? I think that is what Trump means when he says that I could end the war in one day. It's because he's a businessman and he knows how to
negotiate with people like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's
dictators.
That's what he thinks, right, Trump? Yeah. That's one way to do it. The other way, and that's the way they've been doing for the last 3 years, is to give Ukraine all the necessary resources and back them up so that they can fight this war, because
kind of establish their
Europe
dominance.
is like nervous that if you give Russia and Putin this bone, what will they do next? Will they go into Balkan, like Poland, Estonia, stuff like that? Because if Trump goes in now and deals a peace order with Russia without Ukraine having anything to say, he gets the war stopped, but Ukraine will come out as the kind of a loser because they have lost territory to Russia. So if you had these two opportunities, which one do you think is the most?
It's almost like there's pros and cons with. There could be cons too with that, even though I don't think that we need to have unnecessary war, so it's the necessity. What's the necessity of the war there? When, so many people's lives are going to be taken if it continues.
But do you rather see a peaceful solution now where Trump and Putin negotiate peace, or do you want to put further money into the Ukrainian self-defense war?
So the question is like, where else can Ukraine get money to make sure they have a strong military? So that's the question. Does it have to be just from the United States? So, or is that something, if there's a peace deal that's created, so what can Ukraine do on their own to help strengthen their defense? So I tend to be, a no-war person. I know that it's a complicated history there, and it's not just an easy answer. But I do think that Trump has good intentions with that, and then, hopefully after he's done with this term, that Ukraine, and that's the thing. Ukraine has been getting billions and billions of dollars. Like, what are they doing to actually strengthen their military, given the fact they've had so much money given? So I think at this point he probably just sees it as like, okay, they've been given plenty. Let's just negotiate a peace deal so we can just stop the war and save lives. Yeah.
So I want to move on to a subject called law and order. Georgia has always been a state that prioritized law and order very much, and are known for like doing things by the book. I spoke to some former Republican voters here in Georgia the 2 weeks I've been here, for whom the 6th of January and the storm on the Capitol became like a deal breaker. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that was an unfortunate circumstance. Like I would argue that most Republicans were against that happening. I don't know if most that were actually there on January 6th knew what was about to ensue. You have this small faction of people that are the radicals, right? That ended up planning that out. And I think just one person died. Unfortunately, that was the case, and that was not a happy moment in history. But the people that say, well, this is the reason that Trump shouldn't be president. I mean, I think that a lot of times Trump is someone who embellishes. Like, he's someone who just impulsively says things, and not, I don't necessarily think that his intention was to incite violence. That's just my opinion. I think that he was just so distraught by the outcome of the election, and I think he had a strong conviction that and there were a lot of weird things that happened in these swing states, in these swing county, or these swing states in these blue counties, especially like Fulton County here. There were some really weird things, and yes, there's election fraud that occurs, every single election to some extent. Maybe not enough to overturn an election, but you have some Republicans were saying that even if we did do a re-election 4 years ago, not convinced that there would actually be enough votes to overturn the results. But then you have other Republicans saying that it would have absolutely, there was 11,000 plus votes that would have just gone towards Trump for Georgia.
You do have like a person like Brad Raffensperger that is a Republican who says that everything went by the book.
Yeah, and same thing with with Governor Kemp. Trump was upset that Kemp didn't want to call a special session. And Kemp, knew the Georgia Constitution, was like, that's not within my constitutional authority to do that. But what we can do going forward is tighten up our election laws, right? So, but back to the whole January 6th thing. I mean, I think that was an unfortunate thing that happened. That was not. I don't think Trump intended for that to actually be the outcome. I think he was just in it. It was a moment of emotion that he said what he said. Yeah. And people can just take that and say, oh, he incited violence. But you could say the same thing about. I mean, think about, and this is our argument, is going back to the summer of 2020 when you had multiple cities that were burned and looted, and there was this mass organized crime, and obviously with the George Floyd incident, and you had these far left-wing groups basically plan to destroy these cities and burn businesses, and a lot of these were minority-owned businesses. So it just was and many more people died, and many more businesses destroyed the summer before the election in 2020. So to me, it's like when people say, they just want to focus on January 6th, especially people on the left. They want to just focus on January 6th. They're also not intellectually honest enough to say, yeah, that in summer 2020, that was like, there was much more damage that occurred then. So,
but if we stay in the subject of law and order, then we can also add to the 6th of January. Not that it was Seoul or Trump's fault, but he is standing on trial for the incident. And he also standing for trial here later this month, the 26th of November. He stands to get his sentencing for his accusation regarding Stormy Daniels later this month. What do you think now, as he's president-elect, should happen to that trial?
I think it should. I mean, I imagine that it would get get thrown out. But I mean, he is president, so that helps him out that he became president. So it's interesting.
We are in a state, like in Georgia, that prioritizes law and order and things going by the book. And now you're saying that a pretty serious accusation should just be thrown out with the bathwater.
Well, I don't agree with those transgressions from a moral standpoint, right? There's no perfect human, no perfect president. It's interesting because that did not happen like 15, 20 years ago. Not to say that that's, but why is she all of a sudden bringing it up now? You know, it just, that's, to me, it's just a little bit like political lawfare again. Here we go again with all these, and they're you know, he really has had all his political enemies use the judicial system to come after him. It's like, well, why didn't you say something 10 years ago or before he even ran for president the first time? Why all of a sudden, you know, because you also had a part to play in that, Stormy Daniels. I mean, let's take some accountability back on her too. I'm not saying that what Trump did was right. I think it's not it's like a demerit on his character.
Yeah.
But you know, it's just weird. Just like with the whole Me Too movement, you had all of a sudden people bringing up stuff from 20, 25 years ago for elected officials, like with Brett Kavanaugh, and it's just, and without even with in that particular case, not even much proof there that he even did anything. So but yeah, I just, you know, I don't think that it's a good look for Trump. And I'm sure that hurt his family at the time. But that's for him and Melania to work out. But I just, you know, I just question the motive, you know, behind, well, didn't you have a part to play too? I mean, he paid you off, but you participated, you were an active participant in that and accepted the money. So why all of a sudden now?
Yeah. So just to be sure, you are rooting for that this trial against Stormy Daniels, sentencing her last November, it gets canceled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that if she were really being genuine, she would have, you know, brought that up against him sooner. Like, why all of a sudden, it's such an opportune time before he's running for a second term to bring that up, and especially.
Okay. So. Last question here in Law and Order. Trump has said numerous times under his campaign that there is like this enemy within. Do you think that Trump's coming Department of Justice should prosecute people like Merrick Garland, Jack Smith, and others who have played a role in prosecuting Trump the last 2 years?
So if they had broken the law in some regard, you know,
by prosecuting Trump,
then, you know, that's one thing. But I don't know if he meant using the judicial system to fight the enemy within, or it's more of a culture war type situation. I think we would need to specify exactly what he meant by that. Like, if what he meant was using the Department of Justice. I mean, you know, by going after his political enemies, I can't imagine that his focus is on that, because he wants to do other things to help the economy and help world peace and international peace and the border. So I don't know if that...
A lot of your answers is lean towards that many of the things that Trump has said, especially during the last 2 weeks of the campaign, now that he's president-elect, he doesn't mean it that hard. Is that correctly understood?
Yeah, I would just have to, I mean, if he gave specific examples about what he meant by fighting the enemy from within, then I could have more of an opinion, more of an answer on that. So if it was...
But what do you think about the general thing that he's actively saying that he wants to use maybe the government, the Department of Justice, to fight people within, and he's also maybe using the military?
I think with the use of military, I mean, that's when, let's go back to the summer of 2020 when we had all this lawlessness in all these different cities, and then it overwhelmed the police force, the local police force. I mean, I could see, like, okay, calling the National Guard to come in and assist, help to restore law and order. But other than that, I'm not really sure.
But it is a direct threat to
democracy.
And more towards like the political opponents he has had the last 2 years.
Well, if he didn't do that when he was president the first time, you know.
But a lot has happened since, like.
Sure, but that's just kind of speculation, you know, that he would actually use the military to bring them down or to.
So it's not wrong when I hear you say that you should take like what Trump has been said the last 2 weeks. Now he's president-elect. Some of the things he has said, you shouldn't take them as seriously.
Finite. Trump tends to say things. Like I said, he tends to embellish. He'll tend to say things out of just off impulse. And a lot of times, the media will take sound bites of what he says and then kind of take it out of context. Like, if I'd have to see the whole thing, what you're talking about in terms of like going after his political or fighting the enemy from within. I don't know if that's just what he wants to carry out into law. Is it using the Department of Justice to go against his political enemies? I can't imagine, since the justice system was weaponized against him, that he necessarily want to do the same thing. I'm just not convinced of that just yet. There's no other evidence that he would actually do that other than just speculation on what he says. So
yeah. And just you yourself mentioned 2 minutes ago that it's an attack on democracy. Do you think it is that?
Using the Department of Justice.
Yeah. For example, to go like people like Merrick Garland or Jack Smith.
Well, if they actually truly committed crimes, right? If they actually,
but which crimes should that be?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, they might not necessarily violated a law, but I just don't. I want to understand like what Trump actually meant by that, or if he was just saying that out of emotion, like just that fight kind of mentality.
But now you just like 20 minutes ago we spoke about this, that there are some people on the extreme right and some people on the extreme left, but you have this idea that is in the middle. The thing actually happens. Don't you think that Trump is playing an active role in making maybe some of the people in here in the middle more extreme by saying stuff like this?
Like making people in the middle more extreme?
Yeah. Doesn't he lucrate on making people extreme?
I think the people that are, tend to be on the side of like, Trump is our savior, Trump can do no wrong. I think those are like a subset of people. I don't know if it's necessarily going to make people that are right of center, believe everything, or buy into everything he says in terms of like what he wants to do,
but now
to go after his political enemies.
But we have established this, that you do think that what Trump is saying during a campaign, he's not maybe saying it so seriously as he's pronouncing it.
Yeah, because he does embellish.
But when he does say things like this, people will take it literally and storm the Congress, or they will become more extremist than they perhaps were before. Don't you think Trump has a responsibility there?
In a sense, but I think that each individual, you're going to have twisted, crazy people on both sides of the political spectrum. I really don't think that is most people that are conservative, that are Republicans, that are going to take what he says and like try to overthrow government. I think it's, that was like the one instance during his whole presidency, and then into the Biden administration that occurred, that where you have that faction of people that yes, take what he says and like go do what they want to do, get the result they want to get. But I would say most Republicans wouldn't even think about that. Usually they're just like, oh, that's Trump just being Trump, we're not, but we believe in law and order and to not use the justice system against your political enemies. Yeah. So I think most people think like that.
Yeah, I just want to jump to a question here because I think it makes good sense. But like when we have a election in Denmark, 2 weeks up to the election day, there is like this debates every day. And in 2016, I remember there was multiple presidential debates between Trump and Hillary Clinton. This year there was only one, and it was because Trump declined several invitations from the Harris campaign after the 10th of September. Why do you think that is? Why was there only one presidential debate this year?
Between him and Kamala?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he didn't really have the best debate, but I think he had a team of people that were telling him, you don't really need to do this.
And why not didn't he need to do it? Because like, is there you discuss the politics, like the rallies that was intensified, really, really intense after the 10th of September. He did like 25 rallies in a month after the 10th of September.
Instead of a debate.
Instead of a debate, because it's in the debate where you can discuss the politics. So Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I just don't think that he was probably looking at it like, this is not what's going to strengthen my campaign.
Okay.
So this is what's going to strengthen my campaign, not doing another debate with her.
So it's more important than the president.
And also think too, the moderators were very biased. I mean, they just fed, like I said, fed Kamala softball questions, and they were basically arguing with him, about him lying or him, not telling the truth or.
But it's not the Democrats' responsibility that Trump didn't do a good job in the debate.
That's true. Yeah, I think that I was much more impressed with J.D. Vance's debate with Tim Walz.
Yeah.
And so, But
what is more important in a presidential election, like the campaign, the 2 weeks up to enlighten and also tell the Americans what they're going to vote on? Is it like doing some debates where you can actually get to know where they stand politically, or is it to just do what is right for your campaign and throwing a lot of rallies?
Yeah. I think his focus was on winning. So I think he might have had political consultants too telling him this. And
what do you think about that personally, also for the sake of democracy in the States?
I think he did the first debate with Biden, right? So he did do 2 debates essentially. Yeah. So I think he just, I don't know if him doing another debate would have really swung people more towards him or
what do you think
Kamala.
About the democracy, the state of the democracy, that a president's 2 president candidates only have 1 debate in
if it's written into law that they have to have a certain number of debates, that's one thing.
What do you think personally about?
I think that people, when he debated Kamala, I think people were already pretty much decided at that point in September, for the most part. Obviously, you had some swing voters that weren't, a small percentage of swing voters that were not decided yet. They may not have liked either candidate, but do I think that it's like not a threat, but like is it like not upholding your values of this being a democracy by him not going into another debate? Like I'm just not convinced that it is. I mean, I think that he did the 2, J.D. Vance did 1.
Yeah.
I think people were pretty much, when they're looking at numbers, they're pretty much deciding, okay, what's going to be the best strategy for us to win? Because when it comes to politics, it's all about winning. So, I don't necessarily think that's like a threat to democracy. They didn't do a second debate. I don't know. I think he did 2 during that season. He agreed to go on the left-wing media news stations that hosted it. If Fox News had hosted one of them, maybe he would have done that one. I don't know if Kamala Harris wanted to go on Fox. But yeah, I think he was just kind of like, well, if they're just going to be biased against me, why do I even have to comply with that? So I think it's just best for his campaign, and it's what he had to do to win. So. And
winning is the winner takes it all.
I mean, that's politics, and so I think our election laws were a lot better this go round, and there was a ground game with making sure that we had secure elections, and so to me that was supporting our democracy, and the pendulum just so happened to swing back this way, and I think it had more to do with his policies that he was proposing and during the campaign trail that helped him win.
So one question about economics. Up to the election this year, Bloomberg Economic has reviewed some of Trump's economic plans, and it actually shows that his tax politics, as they tend to be right now, actually are lowering the taxes for the 20% of the most wealthy people in the U.S., while it will increase actually a small bit the taxes for the 20% of the citizens that earn the least. That's, can you say, not exactly what he was campaigning for. What are your thoughts on that?
So, all I know is, when I was buying my home, for instance, 3 years ago, 3.5 years, almost 4 years ago, and then he was president in the 4 years prior to that, I'm basically middle class just with my individual income, and I had much more money in my bank account and was able to pay off more student loans and things like that. So I don't know if that's what I remember how things were when he was president. So you can have all these economists that have these theories and everything, but
This is not. This is like.
But in general, so you're saying like the poorest of the poor.
Yeah.
Well, are we talking about people that are on government assistance, or is this just like...
It's like a Bloomberg Economic have made this review of the plans right now and who is going to tax, and it just shows plain and simple that the 20% of the wealthiest people will get a tax cut, while the 20% of the lowest incomes nationwide, that has the lowest incomes, 20% of those will actually have a little bit of more tax to pay.
Well, that's interesting. I have not read that, but I think that there are people that don't agree that trickle down economics works. Meaning, like, if you are run a company, or you're a billionaire, millionaire, top 1%, top 0.01%, that the more your business is taxed, the fewer jobs you can create. So my thinking is that when he is basically implementing these tax cuts, I just don't see it not helping the middle class, for instance, because it did help the middle class when he was president. But it's also less taxes on small business and less taxes on big business, which can then in turn create more jobs for people. So then the unemployment rate goes down. So then that can help the people on the lowest end of the socioeconomic spectrum. So,
but you do have more, you trust Trump's economic plans more than you trust what Kamala Harris ran for.
Yes, I do trust his economic plan more. And maybe, there were some questions about the tariffs being put on, especially Chinese goods.
Yeah.
And I do know that there could be, tariffs aren't necessarily a good thing, but money's got to come from somewhere. But I think that, there could be that economy could take a little bit of a hit at first, but I think the long-term view is that it would bring jobs. We would be purchasing less from China, because China, if you look at Amazon, so much comes from that. But it's very cheaply made stuff. It's like we're basically supporting slave labor over there. They have really young people working, and the child labor laws are not the same over there.
Yeah.
So buying those Chinese goods, actually supporting that, yes, it's convenient, and yet it's cheaper, right? And it can drive productivity with businesses. However, I think what he wants to empower is American industry, so we're going to be eventually, hopefully, exporting more than we're importing.
So I have one question. I couldn't go to this interview without having one question about the climate change. In Europe, there's not a day goes by in Europe where there isn't a talk about the climate change. You are seeing very dry periods over here in the US, creating lots of fires. And in Spain right now there is a national crisis because of water flooding. There's almost been 0 to none talk about the climate in this election campaign for both sides.
Either side.
Both sides.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I think that there's, it seems like, okay, you have conservatives on one hand saying that it's not as bad as it seems. Like there are just some summers that are hotter, some winters that are colder, and some winters that are warmer, and some summers that are not as hot. So I understand that, yes, it is a concern, and conservatives should have a seat at the table. We have the American Conservation Coalition that tend to be run by conservatives that are very that are concerned about the environment. We should, if we're conservatives, like that word is in the word conservation, to help protect the environment. I don't necessarily think that switching everyone to electric vehicles right off the bat is the answer. I think that maybe eventually over a period of time, over who knows how long, 100, 200 something years, maybe we will all eventually switch over to electric. But then you have the batteries, right? Like those aren't recyclable. Those can be. Those can.
But like the electrical cars are a little small thing in the global change.
Yeah, it's just one
now.
thing,
It's
you
just
know.
one small thing. What are your thoughts on the climate change?
But so do I think it's? I mean, do I think it's an existential threat? I mean, it's, you know.
As a young person.
Yeah. I mean, yes. Do I want to see fewer hurricanes? And of course, but
what are your concrete thoughts on climate change?
I honestly, it's not an issue that I've really studied a whole lot. I think if we're gonna,
what are your personal?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's concerning to have natural disasters happen, and is there evidence for that it's actually going to do that?
There is a lot of reports that are saying that it is the way that we are going right now, and the things that we are doing right now to prevent this happening is not enough.
So what would that be asking of just the average, not just American person, but anyone in the world? So are they asking us to live like people in ancient civilizations that had to live off the land and not have all the creature comforts that we have? I mean, I just don't think that's practical. I don't think that not having children and not increasing the population is the answer either, because there's that. But the question I have to climate change activists is like, okay, let me see the evidence that this is what the future is going to hold, right?
So last subject, abortion. Trump has stated that the abortion issue should be decided by the individual states. Mm-hmm. Do you think that he will do that, or would he sign a national abortion ban if a Republican Congress passes a ban?
He denied that he would pass a national abortion ban multiple times. I don't know where Kamala Harris was getting that information. I mean, I think, yes, he appointed 3 Supreme Court justices during his first presidency that were conservative, and Amy Coney Barrett being one of them. And so, they looked at the Constitution and said, this is actually a states' rights thing. So if you really look at it, so that's why they turn it back to the states, is what I believe. I don't think he's going to do a national abortion ban. I think that he wanted just to turn it back to the states for the states to decide individually how their governments wanted to handle the issue, because it is, there are pros and cons to each side of the issue, in my opinion. I mean, I don't think it should be used as a contraceptive just because you can. I think people can also choose to live their lives a certain way that would really abolish the risk of actually having an unwanted pregnancy or unplanned pregnancy. It's like, well, you can unplan a pregnancy, but you still know how you get pregnant. It's like, well, things happen. We have to face consequences of our actions.
But what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts as a young woman that a law or other people shall decide something about your body?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that they say, like, oh, the government won't let you do this with your body. It's like, okay, I get that can trigger women a lot because they're like, oh, they're controlling me. But I'm like, where's the personal responsibility in that? Like, there are ways to not get pregnant. We have that available, so there's almost like no excuse at this point. And that there are women that would hate me for saying that. Like, I get that. But if you just look at it like, okay, our Constitution is for protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That developing fetus, albeit doesn't necessarily have, even after it has a heartbeat and you start to develop features and start to develop, like it does not have, it is relying on that woman to help it live and to nurture it so I just don't necessarily think that it's and who's to say, there's evidence that it has there's risks with getting an abortion. There are safe abortions, but procedures, but safer at least, but who's to say that's not going to affect your reproductive system? Who's to say that you're not going to have some emotional, some regret, carry a heavy emotional burden into your later years in life? Like we don't talk about that. And women, I think that they get on the women that are, saying, well, my body, my choice. I'm like, yeah, but you also had a choice that you know the consequences of that choice. So take some responsibility for yourself.
But don't you think that this is a step back for like women and their freedom and their right to control their own body? Don't you think that it's a step back in development?
I think it's just a shift in values. I don't think it's necessarily, how is that really progressing for women to something that we have this ability that men don't have? We have this ability that is, and that's people, I'm not even putting religion into this. This is just strictly the morality of protecting life or not protecting life. If you want to argue what a life is, it's like, yeah, they may not have consciousness yet, but our country is founded on Judeo-Christian principles, and there's that whole, that the highest level of morality is you saying, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And we're going to all fall from grace, right? Would I have wanted to be aborted? Would I have wanted, despite like maybe a tough circumstance, being born in, let's say I was a baby that was born in jail because my mother was incarcerated, or like, who knows, or just had an abusive family, like, that is not ideal, right? But would I have personally wanted to be aborted? No, I would want to have a chance at life. And if women can just listen to that voice instead of it being like, oh, the government's controlling me. It's like, no, the government, it's just in our Constitution, it's to protect life. And so, so that's what I think. And, one of the values I have is just taking personal responsibility for yourself and then, trying to overcome adversity when it comes our way. So when we have to face consequences.
Super. And so I have one last question. I just need to grab something down here before I ask it. I need to take this on.
All right.
So make America great again. 4 more years with Donald Trump as the new president. On behalf of the U.S., what are you hoping for as the most important thing, if we say the next 2 years?
I would say to fuel the American economy, to make us the strongest economy, and continue to strengthen that so we can, like we said, and that was actually a really good point you had, is like when we're strong, then we can assist where we need to assist on the world stage and play a part in just bringing about world peace. I would say, so strengthen our economy, help drive down inflation with that, help lower the cost of living for people, also to negotiate for peace. And so our American brothers and sisters that are in the military aren't just unnecessarily killed or go into war when it's really just fueling the military-industrial complex instead of it actually truly being to help restore peace in the end. Yes, I'd like to see international peace on the world stage and American economy, and then due process with vetting people to get into the country so we can continue to have a strong America and a strong economy. So that's what I would hope for.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.